Okay, the next best practice, differentiator number 3, that we noticed on the survey item having to do with the employee's perception of whether there are growth opportunities for career development in their organizations. And of course, this is also tied to the employee's belief that the company will continue to grow and continue to be successful. And as we can see, companies that saw declines in employee engagement scored an average of 6 points lower than average on this item. The best practices, there are 5 of them. Of course, there are many more than we were able to show you, but we've picked out these 5, and the 2 I'm going to talk about are the 3rd and 4th bullets. Probably the main thing here is really for managers to meet one-on-one with each direct report and discuss their career goals and have a realistic discussion about how they can keep growing in spite of the financial or market situation of the company. And don't just assume that growth is not possible. Looking at the 3rd bullet, one of the best practices is to challenge employees to make themselves indispensable by identifying unmet needs and reinventing themselves. There's a young woman named Ashley Howard, 22-year-old manager at a company called Food Service Warehouse in Denver. It's an online company that supplies kitchen equipment to restaurants around the country. She was spooked by the crumbling economy, and she wanted to make herself bulletproof. So she became accredited in sustainable business practices and is now in charge of the company's new initiatives to go green. Since she made that proposal and created that new role for herself, she's received a big raise and 2 promotions ever since. That's the kind of role modeling and challenge we need to present to our employees, to take charge of their careers, look at unmet needs that surround them in the organization that could help the company survive, and create their own future. The 4th bullet, encourage horizontal movement and growing in place. Land's End is well known for allowing 2-week job trials where an employee who thinks they might want to do a job gets to actually perform it for a couple of weeks. And during that time, they're learning teamwork with a new area of the company. They're picking up new skills. And Duke Power in North Carolina allows employees to, if they can work out a deal, to actually swap jobs. So you don't have to move up to grow. You can grow in place, and you can move horizontally and grow if you can convince your managers it's in their best interest and the company's best interest, which often means they have to lose good people in exchange. And as we know, many workers are still very much mismatched in the jobs they're in, and this is the time when we can't afford to have that, because you have lost productivity when that happens. So one of the best practices, Gaylord Hotels again, we look to them. When they staffed their hotel in Orlando, they asked employees what was the best job you ever had when they were interviewing them. And they found that several people were not all that happy in the jobs they were in, but reflected back on what they enjoyed doing in previous jobs. For example, one woman who was in charge of managing room service really enjoyed analyzing data. So they put her in a market analysis, data analysis position. Let's move on to differentiator number 4, recognizing and rewarding high performance. This is the 4th area where we noticed a significant difference between the companies that gained in employee engagement and the companies that lost ground. And what's this really about is about making people feel valued at a time when almost everyone starts to feel insecure and start questioning their value to the organization. Moving on to the next slide, recognizing and rewarding high performance, there seem to be 2 big obstacles to this one. One is that many managers still believe that employees shouldn't be recognized for just doing their jobs. I can't tell you how many times I've heard managers say that. And the second belief that they have is that when managers, or the second fact is that when managers are under pressure to produce in a bad economy, they just tend to crank up the negative consequences because they feel pressured to achieve goals themselves. So I'm going to talk about the first bullet, challenge all supervisors to notice and appreciate employee contributions. And the example I'm going to talk about is a company out in California, Joie de Vivre Hospitality. They're a boutique hotel chain. They have 20-some properties. And I spoke with their chief people officer, Jane Howard, who told me, she said, we treat people so well, we don't have to be the highest paid. She said they make regular deposits in their employees' emotional bank accounts. And she cited a story about an assistant chef who packed 6 frozen turkeys in her car one evening and drove 7 hours to deliver them to another hotel for a special luncheon the next day. And she was recognized in an executive committee meeting where the 18 senior executives of the firm get together once a week. And at the end of that meeting, they always ask if anyone wants to recognize or tell a story about an employee who went above and beyond, and her story was told. And when it came back to her that her story had been told, she said, you have no idea how well-timed that was, because she was going through a real difficult personal time. So the problem is we under-recognize our employees. And Joie de Vivre is so committed to their culture of recognition. They thought, like a lot of companies, about canceling their holiday party in December, but they decided not to, because it's an event where they recognize extraordinary service. They recognize, they have a special award they call the Back of the House Award. They have a Rising Stars Award. In other words, they are committed to having a culture of recognition, and it's something that's not easy to do if you don't already have it. The second bullet I'd like to talk about here is confronting poor performers, and I want to talk about this because we can't really afford a lot of poor performers in a down economy, and we know from the Gallup research data that 15% of employees are actively disengaged. And so the other 85% are looking at the company, keeping those 15% around, and that causes them to be actually less engaged than they otherwise would be, especially during hard times. In one survey that I saw in Fortune magazine, 62% of high performers said that they would be delighted if the poorest performers were let go. Now, this may sound a little bit insensitive in an economy like this, but we have to ask ourselves, are we doing these people a favor if they're disengaged and unhappy in those positions? And it's a whole lot better to evaluate employees individually one by one, and it's better to do that than to have across-the-board cuts like the meat cleaver approach. Another best practice here is what Boeing Aircraft is doing, which is to teach their managers how to give feedback, because they realized that a lot of their managers just were avoiding confrontations because it's not fun to give negative feedback to their employees. So they weren't comfortable doing it. They didn't know how to do it. So they began very intensive training, and they're already realizing a positive impact from that.